All right, so students, very quickly, this video is actually designed to actually highlight some characteristics of the rainforest. Now, as you can see on the screen, this is in fact an aerial view or a view from above of a particular part of the rainforest. You can see that big, massive section covered with green, which represents the actual vegetative layer. All right. Now we cannot see different distinctive layers just yet, but just observe they are in fact interconnecting waterways and whatnot because rainforests, obviously, they are found in areas which experience tropical, equatorial climates. And we know fully well the climate is in fact very, very essential in terms of determining the characteristics of the vegetation. Now this is a very blurred image as a matter of fact, showing the different layers, a more, not different layers, sorry, but a zoomed version of the trees. And some areas you might also see some trees basically may, not some, all will simply transpire a lot during the daytime because it is relatively warm. So evapotranspiration rates is in fact very high. And this produces a misty kind of characteristic here, which is technically moisture, which lingers in the atmosphere. In some instances, we call them cloud cover or precipitation. It depends on how you look at it. Now, cloud cover is not precipitation, but sometimes this same mist provides the moisture and just resides on the surface of these leaves of trees and whatnot, allowing the moisture to simply influence the vegetative growth, which obviously we can see is responsible for the very lush evergreen forest of the Amazon rainforest or the equatorial rainforest. All right. Now, these rainforests can simply be found in areas such as the Congo Basin in Africa. They can be found in the Amazon Basin. They can also be found in areas such as Borneo, which is on the Pacific side of the world. All right, so these are essentially associated within the tropical equatorial region. All right, roughly between 5 degrees north and 5 degrees south. But this video is highly associated, referring to specifically to the characteristics of the rainforest. Now take a view of this image. This is a very majestic view. All right, and we can see the watercourses, the waterfalls, the rocks, the vegetation. The place is very green. All right, you're not seeing any area. You can actually be very, very lost in an area like this because it is so vast. Good. Now the objective here is associated with the explanation of the different layers. We have the A layer or the emergent layer. We have the B layer or the canopy layer. We have the C layer, something known as the understory layer sometimes. And we also have the ground layer, which has little amount of undergrowth. Now, highlighting very quickly to the emergent layer, we know these trees, they are striving for light. They grow very, very tall up into the atmosphere, averaging approximately 40 to 45 meters, which is approximately 150 feet up into the air. Below this, now, examples of these trees can include Caper Congomia, like I mentioned in class. Also pay attention to the B layer, which is very clustered. Look at the foliage in the B layer, which is technically below the emergent layer. This B layer is called the canopy. Reason being is because the foliage, the leaf litter, what you call the foliage, is so clustered together, it somewhat impedes a significant amount of sunlight. Not all, but some. And as a result of that, it also helps to retain a little bit of moisture and buffer the effects of the rainfall. So water gradually trickles down to the base layer. That's a protective characteristic as well. All right. Examples of trees that can be found here is in fact the Brazilian nut tree. This diagram, this little image here showing the tree with the trunk have some fruits on it. Brazilian nut tree looks something just like this, where the actual fruits can in fact be attached to the barks of the trees. Not all of them may be like that, but not all the B layer trees may be like that. But this is a very distinctive tree which can be found in the B layer in the Amazon rainforest. Now, sometimes you may actually have a transition zone, which is partially between the B layer or the C layer, right? That is somewhat negligible, but for the purpose of understanding, just remember, it doesn't matter what layer they become to, trees will simply try to strive for light. So they will just grow, they will compete amongst each other, vying for resources, in this case, light and also moisture and nutrients and whatnot. Now, the understory, which is usually known as the shrub layer, usually known as the C layer, is associated with smaller trees. And this can roughly be an estimated sometimes 15 to 20 to even 25 meters. Now, 25 meters is actually significantly higher. In some instances, it can be as high as 30. All right. But the main characteristics for the B layer is more 30 to 35 meters. All right, for the sea layer is approximately 20 to 25 meters average. All right, now these trees are actually adapted to less light. They must be adapted to also conditions where they must strive upwards to compete with all the other vegetation types. Now, that being said, students, below this shrub layer, you may also have other type of vegetation which is quite adapted to very damp as well as uh, dark conditions, because all these tree clusters here, this will technically impede a significant amount of light. And some of which include stuff like fungi, for example, mushrooms and whatnot. You also have ferns, right? Certain types of a variety of ferns, right? You may also have different mosses and lichens and whatnot growing here. Now look at the bottom. You've seen leaf litter. This leaf litter is produced from the trees themselves, where the leaves simply drop down and they are rapidly decomposed because of the warmth, because of the moisture, because of the organisms which act upon it, all right, which rapidly decomposes them. Now, guess what? The soils in the rainforest, although you have rapid decomposition rates, the soils in the rainforest are quickly used up by these trees. Look how big and thick these trees are. So they quickly absorb the nutrients very, very rapidly. That's the reason why the soils in rainforests are said to be relatively poor. All right, and that is something which is extremely important to note. All right, rainforest soils are not rich, they are poor. Why? Because the trees utilize them for their developmental growth. All right, so energy is quickly cycled, nutrients is quickly cycled rather, and as a matter of fact, it is quickly used up for the purpose of a beneficial reason. Trees are often evergreen, not only because of the amount of rainfall and also because of the amount of sunlight, but also because of the rapid cyclic rate of absorption of nutrients from the leaf litter and the remains of animals or even plants. Okay? Even you can see this log at the bottom basically represents sometimes trees, their branches may fall and that is quickly decomposed by detritus feeders and like earthworms and whatnot, and also snails and all these things. And also the fungus or the fungi rather will tend to break them down quickly. Okay? Okay, in terms of an adaptation, we can see there are in fact very thick trunks and very deep and buttress roots. Buttress mean these roots are simply widespread. All right, for the purpose of stability. The same thing is applicable to the thick trunks and the thick barks, because look at the heights of these trees. The trees must require some level of support. That being said, also students, these trees also have very somewhat of a rubbery leaves, and their leaves are also broad in nature to captivate the amount of sunlight primarily during the day for photosynthetic processes. And also the rubbery nature of their leaves allow water to expeditiously exit or flow off, so it doesn't weigh down these leaves or break leaves. Also, and also very important characteristic is that these trees, the leaves possess what you call drip tips, which expeditiously allows water to simply flow off. And that's important because an environment which is relatively warm and moisture rich like this, you cannot have too much water settling on the leaves. The trees are adapted to that condition. Why? Because they don't want to have bacteria and also the weight of the water on their leaves, because it will tend to disintegrate or degrade or decompose their leaves. Bacteria have an effect upon those things. Class, you could also see vines which simply transcend from the upper layers, and you could also see, as a matter of fact, a strangler fig. Stranglers are in fact trees, vegetation would simply wrap around these trees, not only for support, but they utilize the trees as an energy source and compete against the trees, sometimes even killing them. So competition is very stiff. You can either be killed or be killed in the rainforest, trust me. We have some other type of plants, for example, orchids and certain types of basket ferns and whatnot, examples of which, these are examples of what you call bromeliads or epiphytes, which simply use the trees for the purpose of support. All right. This image shows basically the thickness and the interconnected root systems. It's actually branching in different directions. Look at that. Look how majestic that looks. All right. Look at this image, students. Look at how this little guy here is canoeing here in the corner, kayaking or whatever you call it. And look at the trees, how layered they are. Look how evergreen they are. Look how lush they are. Look at the shadowy nature which is cast upon by the shadow created from the overhead foliage or the density of these leaf structures. All right, so folks, look at the rainforest here. This is like a 360 view, right, of a rainforest. As you can see, there are mosses growing on the rocks. All right, we have some ferns here growing as a matter of fact. Look at the leaf litter, which rapidly decomposes, and the trees rapidly use them up. Look at also the branches and whatnot, which simply are characteristically decomposed as well. All right, now these trees simply they are in fact towering. Now this is an open area. This is like actually edges of a rainforest. But in the heart of a rainforest, it will be a lot thicker. It will be so dark you wouldn't be able to see properly. The amount of moisture which is received by the rainforest actually results in streams to flow and whatnot. And this is essential. This is actually, you can see the hydrological cycle is actually very operational here. And the trees will maximize upon this freshwater reserve. This is determined, this level of flow from these little small streams are in fact influenced by the rainfall which you receive almost daily. I don't know if you can notice on this part here, you can see there's a little bit of lichens growing on top of the barks of these trees here. All right, lichens are in fact adapted to very dark, damp conditions as well, just like mosses, which are in fact growing on top of these rocks. All right, look carefully. You can actually see, in fact, some vines running up on the line. These are some of the vines that you could actually find in the rainforest. All right, they are growing along the lines, which is in fact mentioned. This is here, this little wild pine, what you call it. On the vine, on the line itself is what you call a epiphyte. This little tree here, which is also very significant in the rainforest, that is actually considered to be what you call a buacano. This tree here, right? You will find these trees growing almost anywhere, right? A buacano tree. And look at these vines. Look how thick they are. All right, they tend to grow. Now these are not stranglers. These are just simply vines which it can essentially encompass a very large section of the area. This is right here in Freeport, but like I said, we don't have rainforest in Trinidad. We have montane forest. But what we have often dry tropical forest right here in Trinidad, but some elevated areas like Brasseco has more damper conditions and they have what they call montane forest, not rainforest. Some people use it interchangeably, but that's wrong, okay? All right. So look at the cluster of this little vegetation right here in Freeport in Trinidad to be specific. Not rainforest, but we have some semblance or some characteristics which may be applicable to it at some point. All right. All right. So this here is in fact a little section in the garden here on the left-hand side of my house, and this basically shows this is a palmish tree. All right, and you can see all the little vines, different coconut trees, some fruit trees here, some cedar trees in the back in the region here, some immortal tree just in front here, right? Look at the clusters, and you can imagine you being inside of there, how dark it will be. You have bamboo in the right-hand section, all right? Together with same vines running all the way on top. Look how green the area is. If you leave nature untouched, it will tend to be very, very distinctive enough. You will see the trees tend to spread. You will see vegetation becoming very, very dense, all right, and very, very pronounced. This is also an image which is taken from the side where you can see a better view of the vines taking over this coconut tree. I have to cut the vines, which tend to trend from the bottom, and I will just cut them and eventually they will dry off, and the coconut tree is actually trying to compete. Look at this little flower that is actually being sent by this particular tree to compete against this vine. And this vine will actually tend to look like it's suppressing the tree, but this is actually encouraging the tree to grow even more because they are both competing for the purpose of light, nutrients, and moisture, you name it. All right? The same thing is applicable in the rainforest. Good? It is noteworthy to also to mention how nature finds a way, because this palmish tree in the back here, this in fact was not planted by me or anyone as a matter of fact. This simply grew because there were a lot of parrots in the area and they will simply feed and drop the seeds and whatnot. So a lot of birds are responsible for dispersal, just like bats, they're responsible for dispersal of seeds and tend to help to reestablish or reinvigorate a specific environment by dispersing the seeds of trees which eventually grow. All right. All right, even in bright sunshine, and you look below these trees, which is just a single layer of trees, you can actually see how shady it can actually be. The level of shade and how the leaves are clustered together to reduce moisture and whatnot from washing away the soils. And that is just one layer class. Imagine the rainforest when you have a lot. And when I say a lot, I'm referring to a lot of trees like this. Look at the cluster, a variety. Rainforest, 1 square hectare can actually hold more than 100 species of trees, all right, because of the positioning, the climate, you name it, all right, because of the conditions, the temperature. So class, I hope this video is actually very much informative, and I hope you all actually enjoyed it. All right, so look at it. If you want to look at it again, you can look at it if you want, but it's all available for you all, and I hope it's very influential to you all. All right, students, keep good. Bye.